An extraordinary party for an unusual couple. For Shazia Zuberi from a Pakistani family and Henderson Leacock, a black man, this is the first of their marriage ceremonies. Two people with very different backgrounds will become one Canadian family. But from this day on, Canadian racial attitudes will affect their family life. The children they hope to raise will struggle to piece together an identity. Their children may someday choose to see themselves as Pakistani or black or neither. These choices will be shaped by attitudes on the street and attitudes inside the Zuberi and Leacock families. And among the two families joined here, all does not appear to be well from the start. Later at the wedding and reception, Henderson's family is out in force, along with the newlyweds' friends. But Shazia's aunt and uncle are the only Zuberis who would attend. The newlyweds already carry a burden shared by thousands of interracial couples in Canada. They will fight harder for a dignified future. It might console the couple to know that that future has already been lived by other families across Canada. Each has achieved a unique and delicate balancing act. Sunit John's roots are in colonial India, his education English and Christian. He came to Canada in 1960 wanting to assimilate, and he was good at it. Even then, he probably did not expect to meet and marry his wife Lynn. It was one further step away from his origins. Yet cultural give and take remains a feature of the John family life. Before the couple married in 1972, Lynn had almost no contact with people of color. Now in Toronto, they have 3 mixed-race children. Each has a different strategy for bridging the gaps. Their children, Miriam, Matthew and Daniel, started to work out who they were from an early age.
One time when I was little, coming home from school, and I think it was after I'd been to somebody's house for lunch, and I said to my mom, why did we eat curry? Because I realized that, my friends didn't eat curry. And she said, well, it's because your dad's Indian. And I said, oh, I guess that means we're half Indian and half normal. And that became like a really big family joke, and gets to be told at every family party you ever go to.
And when she said that, I thought, first of all, it was hilarious and funny. And I wondered if she conceived of herself as half Indian and half normal. That's my husband. But about a year later, when we were driving in the car, my husband and I, Miriam said to us, "What's a Paki?" So I explained to her that it was someone from Pakistan. Then I thought, she asked me that. So she said somebody called her Paki in the schoolyard.
I would never even admit to somebody that I ever ate curry, because I remember hearing how much they used to tease Mansoor. Remember?
Yeah.
They'd say, Mansoor smells like a sewer and all this stuff, because, he smelled like curry. So I remember hearing that and thinking, oh man, I better never let it slip. But I ate curry when I was a kid.
All of Sunit's siblings married white Canadians, and family picnics are a multiracial jumble of bodies. The racial hierarchy of everyday Canadian life may not disappear, but here life is more comfortable.
I can't serve.
Here too, the children will look around for the signals about who they might be. Some will try to be as white as possible. Some will resent their difference, and some will celebrate it. The John children are still working at ways to fold their Indianness into a life like that of their peers. It's an individual journey, and the family can only be of so much help. It's harder if that family's consciousness of its roots is already fading.
We have a lot of family around us.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're not very Indian either, though. Like, they don't know much about India either, so...
Well,
they're not,
grandma does.
yeah, except for grandma, but no, not... And Auntie Ivy and stuff like that.
When I was growing up, it was different from you two because I had this complex about being white. I wanted to be white. I wanted to have blonde hair, blue eyes, and be like everybody else in my class. I got teased, too. Like, you know, I got called Patrick and stuff.
Oh, like, nobody ever teased me when I was in school.
Yeah.
Even, like, all the way up. I don't remember ever being called names.
Matt's like the least Indian of all of us.
I'm not the least Indian.
He's the lightest skin, too.
Matthew's skin color is remarkable inside his family, and outside it allows him to most easily follow his father's strategy of assimilation. Matthew, above all, wants to lead a Canadian life. His politics are Ontario Progressive Conservative. He organizes for the party at the University of Toronto's Scarborough campus. He shares his father's confident expectation that he will be accepted. He sees himself headed forward and upward with no deep fear that he will be denied anything because of his race.
I hope.
I think from the fundraiser, we can decide the candidates.
Yeah. How much is that?
$100.
Following this path has made Matthew himself a target for family humor, jokes that are both political and racial.
Lawyers always like having somebody like that too.
Yeah. You do actually have to admit.
Like minorities and poor people.
Oh. That was a low blow. Of course, realizing that I am a minority myself.
Well,
You're right. And end the conversation.
no, the conservative says that we're white. I mean, right.
Oh.
Right.
That is not true, Uncle. I'm not white.
Yeah,
I think you are. The way you behave.
Camille Hernandez Ramdwa, born of Ukrainian and Trinidadian parents, cannot adopt Matthew John's confidence. She knows everyday racism and wants to protect her children from it in a way her parents were not able to do. It was an earlier, harder time for interracial couples and their children.
I was left pretty much on my own to develop a racial identity because my parents weren't giving me any sort of support or any sort of guidance in that area. And at school, I was just surrounded by white kids and, you know, I mean, they saw me as different, I got called names or whatever, but I also, at a very, I guess, fairly young age, well, around 12, I really realized I am not one of these people. I'm different. There's something different about me. And it's then that I started to explore different racial identities. And I think I went through different processes looking for something that fit. What really sort of spoke to me was black identity. That just made a lot of sense to me. That's how I felt. And that's also how I was being seen. And as I got a little older, I started to realize it was also Caribbean. Even to define as a Caribbean person is sort of an ambiguous position to be in. People still want you to give some kind of racial definition. So this is, you know, sort of where I find myself at this particular point, and I feel I really have to define as a multiracial person.
Camille's partner, Trevor, is also from a mixed-race background. Their shared experiences have already eliminated a potential source of family trouble. Some things are taken for granted.
I had an extended family that was very mixed. Yeah. So, to me, when I go to my cousins, they never look like me. They look different. They all look different.
Mm-hmm. But an identity inside a family may not easily be found outside it. There, society imposes its own requirements.
I think identity is a very subjective, very personal thing, and I think you have to find the balance between what you truly feel yourself to be, you know, outside of heredity and socialization and things, and also how society sees you. There's actually a term for it. It's called perceptual dissonance between how we see ourselves and how the world sees us. And I think a lot of multiracial people go through this. I mean, I know I go through it almost daily.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes when I tell people I'm my cousin, like one my cousin, like Richard,
yeah,
he comes to my office sometimes, right? You know, and I say, my cousin's gonna come pick up this parcel and we'll give it to him, right? Sometimes I forget to say what he looks like physically. I just say, oh, he's a big fat, he's big and he's bald, right? And he's gonna come and pick up this thing, you know. So Richard comes to the thing, and of course he's black and he's bald and he's big, right? And then he said, Trevor left something here for me. His name's Richard. And then they leave and then they come back. Is he your cousin?
You know?
Yeah. Even though he sounds the same, he also sounds Chinese. You know, that's what
You just can't make that connection.
Kimiko Hota has faced similar situations. Multiracial children can look remarkably different from their parents. For her, this contrast was driven home early.
When I was a young child, and I used to go to the playground with my mother, children used to always say things to me like, "That's not your real mother." My mother's a strawberry blonde with blue eyes and very, very fair. And I used to always say, yes, of course that's my real mother, but I had a funny feeling about it. I often used to think that maybe I was adopted. It wasn't until I studied biology later on that I understood how it could be that I could look so different from my mother, that I was actually a real mixture of my father's, how my father looked and how my mother looked.
Kimiko teaches English to people who are facing an even tougher cultural reality than hers.
Movie? Have you got a really great movie you saw, or a really terrible movie that you saw?
Her students are people who are taking a step away from their ethnic roots. But as she gets older, she has investigated more closely her father's Japanese roots. She lived in Japan. She learned her family's history there and on this continent. But before that, she changed her name.
I was born with the name Kimberly Denise Hota, and it was a name, when I was growing up, people always referred to me as Kim. It was a name that I didn't really identify with. Kimberly's a Gaelic name, Denise is a French name. I didn't feel very much that really reflected who I was. When I finally did change my name was I went overseas to school in Switzerland, and I just enrolled as Kimiko. And so it was really from the age of 18 that I started to go by that name. But it wasn't until I finished university that I legally changed my name. And I feel really, really good about having done that. My grandparents changed their names. They had beautiful Japanese names. My grandmother was Yoshiko Nakamura, and my grandfather was Takashi Hota. But they changed their names to George and Rosie. So I just felt there's some justice in changing my name back to being Japanese. My experiences in Japan were a bit different than what I might have expected before I went over. I found that, I guess I was expected to go over there and be accepted as Japanese, but I found that I was treated as an exotic Canadian, which really quite surprised me initially. In Canada, I think most people look at me and they think I look very Asian. In Japan, they thought I looked very Caucasian. So in Canada, people might say that I look like my father, but the Japanese people thought that I looked like my mother.
For Matthew John, the biggest problem is simple racial hatred. He is shocked into a consciousness of his background only by other people's racism and his parents' difficulty in helping him deal with that racism.
I never really felt like I was different until I think I was 17 years old, and I went to pick up a girl to go to the library with her or something. And I was standing in the hallway where her father couldn't see me, and he asked her, "Where are you going?" And she said, "I'm going out with Matthew." And he said, "You're going out with that nigger again. He's going to get you killed. I see that kind of thing on TV." Or it was something to that effect. But I remember he called me a nigger. And I was just so completely shocked that I just walked out of the house and I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to think.
I didn't understand and know exactly what had been said. And so I think I just, as I did in all situations, tried to understand where that father was coming from.
One of the things I remember, I'm pretty sure I remember this, emphasizing the matter of you've got to start at the place of forgiving him before you can actually work this out and resolve handling your own anger.
I don't know, it would have been like some kind of, I don't know, I don't even know what they could have done, but some kind of advice or something, you know, because it was like the first time I really felt, you know, that somebody's making me feel different. I know for a fact that if, like, I ever dated another girl whose family was opposed to me dating her, I wouldn't go through the trouble of even trying. I wouldn't bother. I'd say, forget it, it's not worth it, you know? go find somebody who's your own race, your parents will love, because like, I'm not going to go through that again. I don't need that kind of grief, right?
I grew up in Winnipeg, and what I remember, I guess, most clearly is that experiencing a lot of racism at the school that I went to and coming home and wanting some kind of support or explanation for these names I was being called. I was being called nigger a lot. And what I got instead was just a sort of a silence, a blank wall. My father was in a lot of denial, and so he didn't want to deal with these issues. And my mother was, had no experience of racism and had no understanding of what I was going through, so she was silent.
Camille will not ignore the racism in her children's lives and will be actively involved in their dealings with it. In her view, mothers have a crucial role to play.
Mothers tend to be the ones that instill cultures in children. And I think if the mother is a person of color, as opposed to the father, and the mother is the one who's doing most of the nurturing and the raising of that child and the educating of that child, social educating, that a mixed child with a mother of color is going to have a different kind of development than a child whose father is a person of color. One thing, that I said, okay, I'm never going to do with my kids. I'm never going to pretend that racism doesn't exist. I'm never going to pretend that there's not differences between myself and my children because, my children don't necessarily look the way I look. I've already experienced that. Children asking me, am I Louise's mother? I'm kind of looking at me strangely because I don't look like him.
Camille's children are growing up with the kinds of support their mother did not have. There is more discussion of racism, more advice about how to handle it. But her son Louis still faces it.
He's aware of racism, but for him, his own self, how he's making sense of who he is and how he fits into the world, is not necessarily the same thing as all these things that Mom has told him that he's grown up hearing about. That's kind of like stuff you might know about historically, like the history of our family, or the history of colonialism, and history of racism in Canada, and First Nations people, and all this kind of stuff. And, yeah, he's well aware of that. But then to take that then and integrate that into, well, who am I? How do I fit into this story?
But for him personally, the thing is how he perceives himself. It's not, it wouldn't matter how people perceive him once he's sure about how he perceives himself. And then it wouldn't matter what people think.
For the newlyweds, Shazia and Henderson, only one family can be called upon to help build that confidence.
That's right.
My parents had reacted to her in a very positive way from day one. They accepted her for who she was. They didn't really pay attention as to her religious background.
Yeah.
He knows how to play.
Shazia's family has still not accepted her marriage.
My dad was very shocked, and he was very upset. My mother was also very upset. And if I choose to do this, then I should be on my own. Like, if I go this route, then it will be without their support.
And you know what?
Her family's refusal to accept her husband has revealed family attitudes that will haunt their marriage perhaps for years to come. Shazia's Aunt Zora knew it would be a problem from the start.
When our community learned about Shazia intending to marry Henderson, it was more like, can you believe that? A Pakistani girl, the Berry girl, is marrying a guy from Barbados? It was a no-no.
Zora was not surprised at the family's response. South Asian prejudices were emerging.
It's an unfortunate fact of life that most South Asians have double standards in that respect. They can complain endlessly about discrimination against themselves, but when it comes to, particularly when it comes to darker races, they are very, very discriminating. At least I find that one of the most discriminating communities.
I felt the entire community feels that anyone that's outside the community is basically shouldn't be married inside. Now they say that, a lot of them would say that, no, I'm not racist, or that, I have brown skin just like you have, and look, I'm the same as you. But I truly feel that when they look at anyone else different, especially myself being black, they kind of look down and frown upon that they kind of put themselves on a higher level as me. Whereas, like the Pakistanis, like people would walk down the street when the young film, look at that patch over there, they're showing the same sort of racism towards me, and not accepting me as a person.
Like all mixed-race children, Kimeko Hota, her brother John, and their cousin Sarah have all been challenged to construct an identity. For John, it was in some ways the toughest.
My Asian grandparents would say I look white, and my white grandparents say I look Asian.
Yeah.
It's sort of even hard to find my own identity because no one else really knows my identity.
Yeah. Yeah, I found that in Canada, being seen as Asian, but when I went to Japan, people saw me as white. That's weird.
To the family, John looks the least Asian of the Hota children. Elsewhere, there is a frequent subtle tension as people try to place him in the racial spectrum.
It's always like you give them an exotic look to your face, or they look in something, trying not to make it too obvious what they're after. Sometimes I just like to give them a hard time and tell them that I'm Canadian and ask where my parents are from. I say from Canada, grandparents Canada, just to sort of, I guess I just get tired of getting asked the same questions over and over again about where I'm from.
And sometimes that's annoying, but I guess if they wanted to know, just to sort of get an idea of what I'm about, then I don't mind. But I see what you mean, but most times I'm not offended by that. People keep asking us until they get to the questions around food and martial arts and all of that. But what the reason that they're asking has to do with race, because they're looking at us and they're seeing race. But the questions that they're asking us are questions of culture. But we're fourth generation Canadian. We're more Canadian than most of the people that are asking us these questions. And what do we know about the culture?
I remember when I was at university, I think I was looking for a job or something, and my roommate came home one day with a job posting, and he said, "This one's perfect for you." And I sat down and I started reading it, and there was like qualifications that I had and some that I didn't, but the last one was hiring a minority, a visible minority that you had to be. And I sat down and I started thinking, am I a visible minority? I wasn't quite sure. And in fact, if you asked me that today, I probably still couldn't answer that fully because I don't really consider myself a part of a visible minority. I always thought of myself pretty much as Canadian.
I tried to see myself as more white or belonging to the rest of my Canadian culture and being the same as everyone else at school. But I think a lot of my classmates saw me differently. And it wasn't until recently I've realized that I'm not Canadian, as I've always thought. And the fact that I do look very Asian.
I feel that Kimiko's name reflects her personality quite well. I don't think changing my name from John Richard Wolfson Hata to Yoshi Hata or something would really do that much for me.
I think that I do look more Asian than my brother does. And so I think that has prompted me to respond maybe differently than my brother has. Where my brother can pass for white, I don't think that I have ever passed for white.
I remember when we first moved into this present area that we lived in, meeting a lot of people, and then it seemed that when people found out that Kim was my sister, then they sort of viewed me differently because they didn't think I was Asian before that, and then they saw Kim, and then I started getting all the bad jokes or little limericks or whatever about Chinese, Japanese, or whatnot.
I felt more acceptance when people didn't know that I was Asian.
There is less ambiguity for the most socially conscious of the John children, Daniel. He seems the most content with his double-sided nature. He roams freely in both cultures, choosing the most attractive and useful bits of each. His idea of the Virgin Mary bridges the gaps in an imaginative and unself-conscious manner. It's a unified whole from two contrasting halves, the blue gown of the Christian tradition topped by a nose ring. Daniel has had the benefit of watching his sister and brother put their pieces of the puzzle together. He has a different way, and it works for him.
You've done a fine job here.
Thank you.
You're such a detailed man. Is this your idea of Mary and child?
Yep. I'm pretty sure.
You're pretty sure?
That's what you
Okay.
more so than like blonde and blue-eyed. Anyway.
You've got an interesting combination there, Dan, in that she looks very Indian, but her skin is even whiter than mine.
Well, that's like because she was Jewish, so she wasn't like that dark-skinned. I don't think like Jewish people are.
It's interesting you put a nose ring. How come?
Because in the Bible, you know, in the Old Testament, it talks about nose rings. I think it was gave it to Rachel at the well, gave a nose ring. And also I read books on it, like I looked it up to see whether that's what they would have worn, and it said, yeah, they wore nose rings. So I said to put a nose ring on. It shocks people, but yeah.
That's half of your battle, huh?
Yeah.
Like Dad and Mom don't freak out and do stuff like that. Like they understand, right?
Although Mom is like, well, not so much with the nose ring, but like
because of the big thing.
Yeah. Well, that's Indian stylistic trait. It's not anything like Mom makes it out to be some kind of hideous thing. But anyway, that's what Indian art is like. But anyway,
it wasn't.
I'm defending myself here. But anyways, she did get like, when I made that picture of God with like many arms, because like it's symbolic, right? And anyways, who says he doesn't? I mean, what is it? Say in the Bible, God only has 2 arms. Period.
Well, I think God's supposed to be a spirit, so it doesn't really
exactly.
have a bodily
like,
shape, right?
The point is it's symbolic, and she was like, that's not the Christian God at first, but then after a while, it's like, you know, Mom, she gets like that.
Daniel's investigations have actually refocused his family's attention on its Indian history and culture.
Daniel probably is the one that has always had the most of a sense of injustice, you could say, because and he's been the one most...
You read the history books and people that are put out to be heroes and that were racist, whether it's against blacks or native people, they're racist and they're heroes in one of the history books.
He's been very good at you know, bringing that out. Now, he's done a lot of reading and all this sort of thing, so he knows the cultures, you see, so he knows what these guys are talking about. And he, you know, he can bring that sort of stuff out. And one of the things that he's done, I mean, right here at home, because, you know, some of my attitudes have been wrong. And I, partly conscious, partly unconscious, you know, because, of course, I've been formed by the kind of education I got. You know, I didn't know there was such a thing as African civilization. I mean, I really didn't, you know, because it was never really mentioned as such.
Daniel's investigation has sometimes made him angry, yet that anger is useful for his family.
Daniel's anger and indignation ignites something in me, and he challenges Sunit, maybe even more than I do, or else Sunit, you know, it would just be Sunit's opinion. And so his anger and his good example of reading and finding out about that makes me angry too, and I think that's a good thing, because when we get emotional, we'll do something, even if that emotion just changes us. And then I'm more likely to speak out when I hear somebody say something, because I have some facts that he's taught me. So that's the good thing about our kids' anger, is they're not just angry against a particular incident or thing that's done, but he's even angry on behalf of people that are not dead.
Like Dad doesn't really, sometimes he doesn't understand the way things are now, you know. And there are some things Dad didn't understand, like when I was a kid. I wanted to play like ice hockey, right? Because all my friends were playing ice hockey, and of course I liked hockey, I liked playing road hockey, so I wanted to play ice hockey. But
he didn't put me in ice hockey because he wanted me to do figure skating first. And I tried to explain to him, nobody does figure skating before they go to ice hockey, but he wouldn't believe me.
I know.
So that's why I never got to play hockey, and it still ticks me off.
With me, like being a girl, you know,
Yeah.
he doesn't seem very Indian, so to speak, but he does have that background, like in terms of when I was when I was growing up and stuff, wanting me to stay at home and be a good girl, and why would I even want to go out with my friends? He could never understand it. It could just infuriate me. He could just never understand. No matter how many times I argued with him, cried, pleaded, begged, why I would want to go out with my friends.
Yeah.
Now I'm old enough, he can't stop me or anything.
Maybe I treated Miriam as a girl differently from the boys, and giving the boys more freedom in going out and stuff like that. I was just as concerned in all cases that they approached that whole business of relations with the opposite sex from a Christian point of view and a biblical point of view, that is, considering the seriousness of their sexuality. It's not given for, casual foolishness. It's tied in with marriage, and it's intended to be very much a part of marriage, so that you're thinking in those terms, and I've always put that to them.
Marrying into another mixed race, a different racial family has probably been not so much about marrying somebody of color, but marrying somebody who comes from a whole different culture. And in Sunit's case, it wasn't just that he was coming from an Indian culture with different generations-long understanding of male and female roles that was difficult. But Sunit is an Indian Christian and a believing Christian family.
Their parents' Christianity is another layer of culture their children must integrate into their personality. Their lives are different, and their father's response to the kind of racism they encounter outside their home may prove to be of little help to them. In a racially tense world, it may be too yielding or too passive.
As a Christian parent, as a parent, period, is that my children ultimately, and honestly, not with the pretend thing, not sort of ignoring the racism and the racist problems and all that, but responding ultimately with love for their enemies. See, that is the thing that I would be most proud of with my kids, if they love their enemies.
They challenge you all the time, even when Sunit begins talking this way. They'll say, "But Dad, don't give us all this theory. This is the situation that we're dealing with right now." Yeah. They want. Sometimes they just want you to hear them, because you don't have an answer for them. But I think the one good thing about a home is we can't change some of the things that they'll be up against, and I don't even know the answers to them. But at home, this should be a place where they can challenge us, where they can talk, where we're going to listen, where we're going to be willing to change and let them change us.
And I think sometimes to admit, like you said, I don't have the answers. No. To be able to say I am, powerless in this situation.
His dad has some really strange views of the world. He's still living in 18th century England.
So, he's like a coconut. He's brown on the outside, but white on the inside.
I think in some ways, yes, I've become more white on the inside. Partly through university experience, and because of my background in India, where I'd already become westernized or whatever, I don't know what term to use, and colonialized or whatever. I had a lot of English stuff, through my education in my school in India and stuff like that, already in me. And when I came here, my orientation was European. Dan likes to say that my family is just too Eurocentric.
But even now, though, if I ever have a problem or something, or I need advice, I go talk to Dad. I just assume that Dad's always right. So whatever he tells me must be right then, right? So I just go to Dad.
I know.
I always knew that Dad could be wrong.
The racial histories of Canadian communities are all different, but the World War II internment of Japanese Canadians adds unique drama to the Hutta family history.
This thing about the internment has made our experience really quite unique. In contrast to other mixed people, because when our fathers were growing up in St. Catharines, the Port Dalhousie area, there were no other Japanese families around. So I think that some other cultural groups may have, stayed with their cultural group. But for us, it really is, like race and culture, they are separate things.
They're very separate.
Very Canadian culture.
Yeah, for our fathers, they were forced almost to assimilate into the Canadian culture. My father, everything he did was to be, to be a part of the Canadian culture. And I don't ever remember hearing stories about he and his family doing sort of having Japanese customs. They tried very much to adopt the Canadian culture.
Our father fit in this through things like sports.
I was just going to say that. Yeah, my dad too. He was really big into football, playing hockey.
The Canadian style.
Exactly.
Have you seen that picture before, sir?
Oh no, I haven't. This is new.
Yeah.
Strategies to deal with racism can define families because the parents are incapable of seeing their children as different and cannot understand why anyone would think otherwise.
We were in a store one time, and I had you and Mike with me, and like to me, you don't look any different than me. And the lady asked me whose kids they were, and we're getting really, they're my kids. I don't look like you. They certainly do. You were very young, you wouldn't remember that, but I remember being really angry and upset that she would think they were somebody else's kids. To me, you look just like me. Because I don't think of you guys as Japanese. That doesn't really. Only when we're talking about it that I think, oh yeah, right. But to me, you're just Sarah and Ron. That's it.
When my friends say that, or many of my acquaintances say that, it's actually hard for me to believe them. I don't mean that. I don't mean that in a negative way, but it just, I can't believe that they could say, I don't think of you as being Japanese. I mean, you're looking at me. What is it that you're looking at if you don't think of me as being a little bit different?
Well, every time I meet someone, the first question they ask is, what's your background?
I didn't realize that you were asked that question all the time. Didn't even occur to me.
It's something that happens every time I meet someone new. Just about, somewhere in the conversation will come up of where you're from and then what's your background, the lead into that question.
I guess because I'm not of a racial minority, or not really, I'd never even thought of that. You never mentioned it before.
I think my father was always taught to ignore the person who's making the racist comments and to ignore the behavior. And so my mother picked up on that in a way I wish that they had both dealt with it in a more direct way and had taught my brother and I how to speak back in a way that the person would realize what they had said was extremely offensive to us. And perhaps they would learn from it. Even if they didn't, at least we would feel better about it. But to bottle that up and not to be able to react to someone when they've made comments like that, it's upsetting. And when it happens, time and time again, it really builds up and it becomes an issue. And I think it's not until now, some, 10, 15 years later, that I've been able to deal with that pain.
I'm very critical when I see people of different races or different backgrounds coming together. I'm very, very critical of it. I just want to know why. It's a nice thing to say we're in love, or love is going to conquer all, or, who cares what people think, they're closed-minded. The reality is we're living in a racist world, and you're going to have to deal with racism. And you may want to shut your ears to it and lock yourself away in a bubble, but your kids won't be able to do that. They're going to have to go out in the world and go to school and deal with these issues. And if you don't want to deal with it, they're going to have to deal with it on their own, which is very, very difficult.
This is the heaviest burden carried by mixed-race children to steer their way pretty much on their own. Their parents, having taken a step to transcend racism by marrying each other, often assume that their acts and similar acts will eventually kill the racism around them.
One thing that really disturbs me too about children coming out of this relationship is that sometimes the parents have this idea that the children are going to save the world, they're going to conquer racism because you have these two races coming together in this child. This child is a sort of blessed event and is going to unify. That's a terrible pressure to put a child under. and it's very erroneous. I mean, you can't expect racism to end because people are mating together. I mean, this has been going on for centuries. It's been going on for centuries. It hasn't changed a damn thing. If you look at the Caribbean, it's been going on for 500 years. You know, a huge percentage of people in the Caribbean are mixed people. It hasn't changed anything. It hasn't changed our relation.
That's been the story of my life. My whole life in Canada has been, where are you from? What are you? Is that your mother? Or my mother being asked, are they adopted? You know, and then if you say, oh, I'm from Winnipeg, or I was born, oh no, where are you really from?
Yeah.
Right? No, where were you from before? Well, what's your nationality? I mean, it's just a constant rephrasing of this question, trying to place you somewhere other than here. You know? And that's, I mean, that's why I'll just never really feel Canadian. And I don't really, you know, I don't feel any great loss about that either. I'm not one of these people that say, oh, I feel so strongly about my Canadian identity. I don't. I just feel that, you know, this has never been home, and I think a big reason that has never been home is because I was never treated from very young as if this was a place for me.
Kimiko Hota, after all her similar searching on a few continents, has come to a different decision about her place and her identity.
So I've traveled all over the world, I guess. It's interesting that in Japan, people didn't identify me as Japanese. They identified me as Canadian. In a country as well like Scotland, which is very homogenous and very white, I felt very conspicuous there. In India, I stuck out. I stuck out when I lived in Switzerland. I stuck out there. I had to travel all over the world to realize that the place where I probably feel the most comfortable, where I feel that I blend in the most and can just relax and be myself, is probably Canada and really the city, Toronto. To realize that I am multicultural, this is a good multicultural environment, and I'm pretty happy here.
The lives of mixed-race children are far more complex than most parents realize. Chowdhury and Henderson may not even be aware that the opposition to their relationship is going to impact on the self-esteem and identity choices of their children. Mixed-race children experience racism not only within society at large, but also within their own families and communities. Chowdhury and Henderson may never be able to fully understand their children's experiences, but they need to become aware that their children will have different experiences from their own and will feel the pressure of a society that is obsessed with placing people in distinct racial categories.